The letter that changed everything. I never thought sorting through my deceased mother's belongings could turn my entire life upside down. Mom passed away last month at 92 years old from natural causes. And here I am, a 70-year-old woman, sitting in her bedroom, surrounded by boxes containing memories from her long life. Mom was always a woman of few words. She grew up on an Iowa farm during the harsh times of the Great Depression, when people kept their feelings and pain to themselves. In our family, emotions were held inside and problems were solved quietly and stubbornly. My entire life, there seemed to be an invisible wall between us. I attributed this to her stern upbringing, to the loss of my twin sister at birth. Yes, I had a twin sister, Rose. Mom told me this sad story from my earliest childhood. We were born at home in the winter of 1953, when a blizzard cut our farm off from town for several days. The birth was difficult, and Mom barely survived. Rose came into the world second, weak and pale. Dr. Harris, our family doctor, did everything possible, but the baby lived only a few hours and died in his arms. Mom never talked about it in detail, and I learned not to ask unnecessary questions. The pain of loss was written on her face every time I tried to discuss my dead sister. She would quickly change the subject or find urgent household chores to do. But my entire life, I was haunted by a strange feeling of incompleteness, as if part of me was lost somewhere. In childhood, I often talked to an imaginary friend named Rose. I played for two, set the table for two, saved half my candy, explaining to Mom that it was for Rose. Mom would turn pale each time and distract me with other activities. Friends said such feelings were normal for twins, even if the other twin died. Some kind of mystical connection that doesn't disappear with death. I read about this in magazines, listened to radio programs about the twin phenomenon. Scientists explained it as a special bond formed in the mother's womb. As I aged, the intensity of these feelings dulled, but the sense of loss never completely left me. Even in happy moments of life, wedding, birth of children, family holidays, somewhere deep in my soul, I felt emptiness, as if someone very important was missing from the celebration. Today, I was sorting through Mom's nightstand, packing away her few personal belongings. Old reading glasses, a small bottle of perfume she hadn't opened in 10 years, several family photographs, and there, in the bottom drawer, lay her worn Bible, the same one she read every evening before bed. I took the book in my hands, feeling the familiar smell of old paper and Mom's perfume. The pages were covered with her neat pencil marks, with dried flowers from the garden serving as bookmarks. Mom was a deeply religious woman, and the Bible was her main comfort during all difficult times. Opening the book randomly, I hoped to find her margin notes, perhaps some thoughts or prayers that would help me better understand my mother. Between the pages of the Gospel of Matthew lay an envelope yellowed with age. On it was my name, written in Mom's familiar handwriting, Eleanor. Below was a note, "Read after my death." My heart began beating faster. A deathbed letter? Mom was never sentimental, and the thought that she had left me a personal message moved me to tears. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in an unfamiliar hand, the neat handwriting of a nurse or teacher. In the upper right corner was a date, exactly 10 years ago. The letter began formally. "Dear Mrs. Johnson, my name is Margaret Finley. I was a nurse for Dr. William Harris in the 1950s in Cedar Rapids. I am 90 years old, I have cancer, and doctors give me no more than a month to live. Before I die, I must tell the truth about what happened in 1953. I stopped and reread the first lines 3 times, not understanding. Dr. Harris? That was the same doctor who delivered Mom's babies, the one who tried to save my sister Rose. But what could his nurse know that was so important that Mom had hidden it from me for 10 years? I continued reading, and my world turned upside down. Your daughter Rose did not die at birth. She was a healthy baby. Harris created a fake death certificate and gave the girl to a childless couple from Chicago for $2,000. He gave your family $1,000, explaining it as payment for silence. He kept the rest of the money for himself. The letter fell from my hands to the floor. I stared at the words written in neat handwriting, not believing my eyes. Rose is alive? My twin sister, whom I had mourned for 70 years, is alive? I picked up the letter and continued reading with trembling hands. I worked as a nurse for Dr. Harris for 15 years and knew about his illegal activities. He was involved in selling babies to wealthy childless couples throughout the Midwest. Over 30 years of practice, he sold more than 100 children from poor families. I remained silent because he threatened me with prison as an accomplice. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold the piece of paper. My heart was pounding, my ears were ringing. It took me several minutes to calm down and continue reading. Before my death, I turned over all documents and records of illegal adoptions to the Iowa police. Dr. Harris's case is being investigated, although he himself died in 1987. I found many families destroyed by his actions, but I also found your daughter. The next lines made me cry. Her name is Rosalind Walters. She lives in Chicago, Illinois. She's married to a farmer named Robert, and they have 3 adult children. Rose works as an elementary school teacher at St. Mary's School. She's a wonderful woman, very kind and intelligent. At the end of the letter was a note. Rose knows she's adopted. Her adoptive parents, the Walters family, told her the truth when she turned 18. She has dreamed of finding her biological family her entire life, especially the twin sister she was told about. Please tell Eleanor that she has a sister who loves her and wants to meet her. Attached to the letter was a sheet with a Chicago address and phone number. I sat on Mom's floor and cried like a child. 70 years. For 70 years, I thought my sister was dead. For 70 years, I lived with emptiness in my heart, thinking it was normal. But she was alive, growing up, studying, getting married, having children, living her life 3 hours away from me. And Mom knew. For 10 years, she knew the truth and remained silent. Anger mixed with pain and bewilderment. How could Mom hide such a thing from me? How could she let me suffer, knowing that my sister was alive and looking for me? But then I began to understand. I imagined that terrible winter of 1953, the farm on the verge of bankruptcy after the previous summer's crop failure. The family already had 2 small children, my older brothers, 4 and 6 years old. Mom had barely recovered from the difficult birth. And suddenly, there were 2 more twin girls. There was no money even for food, let alone medical care for 2 infants. Dr. Harris delivered the babies for free as a service to the family. That was the custom in rural areas in those days. And then he offered the parents a way out of a hopeless situation. Perhaps the parents really thought they were doing the right thing. Keep one daughter in a loving but poor family and send the other to wealthy people in the city where she would have better education, medical care, and every opportunity for a successful life. But they didn't think about us, about what it means to break the bond between twins. The nurse's letter mentioned that the $1,000 saved our farm from bankruptcy. Now I understood where the money came from for the new tractor in 1954, for house repairs, for my college education. Mom always said they were lucky with the corn harvest, but I remembered that unsuccessful year. Our parents lived with this secret their entire lives. Dad died in 1989, taking the secret to his grave. Mom carried this burden for another 30 years. Now I understood her strange behavior when I mentioned Rose. I understood why she always put 2 candles on the cake on my birthday. Why she cried looking at my childhood photos. Why she never threw away baby clothes, even when they were no longer needed. She remembered Rose every day. For the next 2 days, I couldn't think about anything else. I reread the nurse's letter dozens of times, trying to believe what was happening. Rosalind Walters, teacher, married to a farmer, 3 children, lives in Chicago. I have a sister. I have nephews or nieces. I have family I never knew existed. I picked up the phone many times, dialed the number from the letter, but couldn't bring myself to press the call button. What would I say to a strange woman? How do you start such a conversation? Hi, I'm your twin sister, who you thought was dead? It sounds like a crazy person's prank. Besides, 10 years had passed since the letter was written. Maybe Rose had already died, or moved, or wouldn't want to communicate with the family that sold her. On the 3rd day, I realized I couldn't live without knowing the truth. Whatever it might be, in the evening, when my children had gone home after helping sort through Mom's things, I dialed the number. The long rings seemed like eternity to me. A woman with a soft, pleasant voice answered the phone. She simply said, "Hello," and I heard something familiar in her intonation, something that reminded me of my own voice. I introduced myself and explained that I was calling from Iowa about a letter I found after my mother's death. I mentioned the name of Nurse Margaret Finley and Dr. Harris. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Then Rosalind, and it really was her, said she had been waiting for this call for 70 years. She had known about my existence since she was 18, when her adoptive parents told her the truth about her origins. They explained that they had gotten her through a doctor who helped poor families place children in good homes. Rose admitted she had hired several private detectives over the years, trying to find her biological family. But the trails went cold. Surnames changed after marriages. Documents disappeared. Witnesses died. She found Nurse Margaret Finley a year before her death and learned the whole truth about Dr. Harris. We talked for 3 hours. Rose told me about her life, and I couldn't believe the coincidences. She got married at 22, just like me. Had 3 children, 2 years apart, just like me. Was widowed at 60 from her husband's heart attack, just like me. After her husband's death, moved in with her eldest daughter, just like me. Rose admitted she had felt a strange emptiness her entire life. As a child, she often talked to an imaginary friend she called Ellie. She set a place for her at the table, saved half her candy. Her adoptive parents thought it was ordinary childhood play, but Rose felt the friend was real, I got goosebumps. At the same time, I was playing with imaginary Rose. Rose told me she became a teacher, even though her adoptive parents wanted her to be a doctor or lawyer, professions with higher income. But she had always enjoyed working with children. She married a farmer and moved to the countryside, even though she grew up in downtown Chicago. She was always drawn to rural areas without understanding why. She loved country music, even though her adoptive parents listened only to classical music. She woke up at 5 in the morning and couldn't fall back asleep. She was terrified of spiders. She baked apple pies every Sunday, even though no one taught her how. I had all these same habits. When I told Rose about our childhood on the farm, about our parents, about our brothers, she cried. It turned out that her adoptive parents showed her a map of Iowa and said her family lived somewhere there. Rose often looked at the map and dreamed of finding her way home. I asked if she could come visit me. Rose said she was ready to fly even tomorrow. She needed to see me, to see the place where she was born, our parents' graves. The next day, I met her at the Des Moines airport. I stood in the arrivals hall with a sign Rose Walters, even though I realized it was silly. I wasn't a taxi driver, but I needed something to do with my hands to keep from shaking with excitement. The plane landed at 2 in the afternoon. Passengers were coming out of the arrival area, and I peered at every face. And then I saw her. A woman my age was slowly walking down the corridor, looking around. Gray hair in the same bob as mine, the same height, the same walk, the same blue eyes behind thin-framed glasses. She was wearing a blue cardigan exactly the same shade as the one I was wearing. Our eyes met across the entire hall, and time stopped. I knew it was her. She knew it was me. We recognized each other at the DNA level, at the level of that mystical connection that had never disappeared. Rose approached me slowly, as if afraid I would disappear like a mirage. She asked quietly if this was Ellie, and I nodded, unable to say a word. We hugged in the middle of the noisy airport and cried. People turned to look at 2 elderly women holding each other and sobbing. But I didn't care at all. I was hugging my sister. My twin sister, whom I had thought dead for 70 years. Rose whispered in my ear that I was exactly as she had imagined me her entire life, that she would have recognized me among 1,000 people. On the way home, we never stopped talking. Rose told me about her life in Chicago, about her adoptive parents who loved her very much, but who always seemed foreign to her, about her children who were amazingly similar to my children, about her farmer husband who understood her attraction to the land better than her city adoptive parents. I told her about our childhood, about how our parents went to the cemetery every year on our birthday and put flowers on an empty grave with the name Rose Johnson, about how Mom always cooked food for one more person than needed, then wondered why she had cooked so much. At home, I showed Rose family photographs. She cried, looking at the faces of our parents, our brothers. She said she felt they were familiar, as if she had seen them in dreams. It turned out she really had seen them. Since childhood, Rose had dreams about a farm, about a girl who looked very much like her, about an elderly couple who seemed dear to her. Her adoptive parents took her to a psychologist, thinking the child had adaptation problems. Rose showed me photographs of her children, my nephews and niece. The resemblance to my children was striking. Her middle son, Michael, could have been a twin brother to my middle son, James. And the daughters were so similar, they could have passed for sisters. We talked until deep into the night. Rose admitted she finally felt at home, that for the first time in her life, she didn't feel that strange emptiness that had always been with her. I realized I felt the same way, as if a puzzle I had been assembling my entire life had finally found its missing piece. The next day, we drove to the old family farm, which I had sold after Mom's death. The new owners allowed us to walk around the property. Rose stood where the house used to be and cried. She said she recognized this place, even though she had never been here. Then we went to the cemetery to our parents' graves. Rose brought white roses, her favorite flowers as it turned out. She stood at the headstone for a long time, then said, addressing our parents, that she wasn't angry with them, that she understood they had no choice in those difficult times. Rose spent a week with me. Every day we discovered new coincidences in our lives. Same habits, same fears, same dreams. We fell asleep and woke up at the same time. We cooked the same dishes without discussing it. We bought identical clothes at different stores. My children came to meet the aunt they had never heard of. They were amazed by our similarity, not only physical, but also in mannerisms and ways of expressing thoughts. My son Robert said he now understood why I had always seemed incomplete to him, as if I was waiting for someone very important. Before leaving, Rose suggested moving to Iowa to be near me. Her children were grown and living their own lives. Nothing held her in Chicago anymore, and here, on ancestral land, she felt truly at home. This idea seemed wonderful to me, to spend the rest of my life next to the sister I lost at birth and found at 70. Now a year has passed since the day I found the letter in Mom's Bible. Rose moved into a house across the road from me. We see each other every day, cook together, go to church together, tend the garden together. Our children became friends with each other. The grandchildren can't tell which of us is which and constantly get confused. Rose and I laugh that at 70 we're playing the Guess Who's Who game again, like all twins play in childhood. People in town got used to seeing us together. They say we're like old friends who have known each other their entire lives. That's true. We knew each other our entire lives. We just couldn't meet. Sometimes I think about Mom and understand that she suffered with this secret every day. Perhaps the nurse's letter was both a curse and a blessing for her. A curse because it confirmed her fears. A blessing because it showed that Rose grew up happy. Mom didn't dare tell me the truth while she was alive, but she made sure I would find out after her death. She hid the letter in the Bible, knowing I would definitely open it. This was her last gift to me, the opportunity to find the lost half of myself. At 70, I finally became whole. Rose says the same thing. We no longer feel that strange emptiness that haunted us our entire lives. The letter from Mom's Bible changed everything. It showed that family bonds are stronger than time and distance. That love doesn't disappear, even when it seems everything is lost forever. For 70 years, I was half of a whole. Now I know what it's like to be complete.